I would be much, much less political. I'm pretty unpolitical, but my doubling down on what was happening in the United States just was done to ignore people. Very early on in my first Israeli television interview, I said I would be surprised if more than 10 people died. That was insensitive and stupid and not the way you talk on television. But, they'd been asking annoying questions and showing how stupid they were for a while. I was angry with Stanford colleagues. I was angry with other colleagues people in my own field, essentially a field that I invented, were behaving, and extremely stupidly.
You said in 2020 that there is no doubt in your mind that when we come back to look on this period, the damage done by lockdown will exceed any saving of lives by a huge factor. Do you still stand by that view?
Definitely. I think we don't. The difficulty is taking it apart. One reason you could say it's particularly clear in the United States. By lockdown, it's disruption of society. It's not. It's everything that comes from the fact that hospital appointments are canceled, people are not exercising, gaining weight, social interactions. Those are all consequences of lockdown. And I think undoubtedly, remember those, missed, for example, I think in England they were saying 100 million hospital appointments being missed. They will have an effect. Either hospitals are completely useless, or that will have an effect going forward. So I think that, it also turns out in retrospect that the COVID was only bad in in the high income countries, which is where you've got good data. There are about 35 of them. COVID was only bad in one Western high income country, not the United States. The United States, COVID was 4 times Europe. The other bad countries are Bulgaria and Poland. So basically, USA, Bulgaria, Poland are in a category of their own. The United States has had a declining life expectancy for a long time. I don't know enough personally about Bulgaria and Poland. Bulgaria has the highest mortality, the highest normal mortality in the world. So if you actually, most countries have an age-related mortality of a bit less than 1%. Mortality in Bulgaria is 1.4%. It's one of the highest. So basically, it turned out that in COVID, how well you did depended mostly on how healthy the country was beforehand.
So is that why there was a bit of a disconnect between your initial expectations of US deaths versus the actual number?
Yeah, what I made a huge mistake in is not realizing this would keep on going until everyone was exhausted. It wasn't going to be, and Europe behaved in a very different way, and I don't think I realized that somebody who sort of travels freely between the United States, although I'm mostly in New York and California, and various countries in Europe and China, I felt that the United States and Europe are similar. So I think that probably is the reason. Also, I made another mistake, and I got caught up in the political game of Twitter. At the time, my son was actually also on Twitter, and we were sort of, playing games with each other. There's scary things about Twitter. I'm very pleased that I did it, and I'm still happy. I met some very good scientists, and I've learned a lot about other things. But I think it's too easy to become political. So I think one reason why I sort of doubled down on the United States being over quickly is because it would annoy my Democratic friends. Now, I'm not political. I'm actually democratic in many ways. But I also see a lot of good things about Republicans. I'm not a political. Okay, when I see sports, I don't care which team wins. I like sports, but it's not like I'm not a fan. And I think political parties are like fan organizations. So I think that was part of the reason. I've thought about this a lot. I think that in retrospect, everyone was wrong about how long this was going to go on for. The Fauci at one point said he didn't expect more than 250,000 American deaths. And the number will...
Let me ask you this then, with 3 years on in the power of hindsight, Dr. Levitt, what were you absolutely 100% right about? And I know you don't like ranking, but what are you almost...
I think I was right in that an extrapolation from the Diamond Princess and from Wuhan allowed one to estimate the damage from COVID. The way the damage is measured is how much extra death you get compared to expected death. And that number, I think, for the entire world right now, where we have the data, averages 8%. Now, at that time, I said it would be 1 month of extra death. So 8% of the year is 1 month. Actually, the United States would be 2 months. Well, this is what I said so very early on. Now, those estimates were basically a counter to the Ferguson estimate of 1 year. But the fact is that each year of COVID has elevated the amount of death by about 8%. It also turns out in most of the world, there was a recent flu pandemic. For most of the world, it's 2009, 2010, where there was more excess death than during COVID. So I think those are the things that's a very clear-cut thing. There were other things that we're still investigating about how it spreads. You know, the COVID grows incredibly quickly, but then also dies. And we saw this in China. Basically, they managed to infect almost all of China in 4 weeks. Now, there's no way that an exponential model can do that. It turns out that one of the things that I think I'm very happy about, it's still unconfirmed, super spreaders are really important. And basically, what we found is, if you look at how rumors spread on the internet, it's not like each person tells 2 people and they tell 2 people. It's that some influencer who has 1 million contacts tells everybody. So initially, with exponential growth, the word exponential has become associated in people's minds with very fast. Exponential means doubling after some time. So let's say you start with 1 and you want to get to 1,000. That is 10 doublings. 2 to the power of 10 is 1,024. So if you double every week, it's going to take you 10 weeks to go from 1 to 1,000. You can increase 1,000-fold. Now, even if you double, and typically COVID was doubling every week, even if you double every 3 days, that's still 50 days. But it isn't the way it works. If you have super spreaders, essentially one person, and this is, some influencer gets the news. He can have 1 million people, so it can go from no one to 1 million, and then the other super spreaders will take over. So that, I think, is very, very important. It relates to the fact that societies are connected a bit like internet users. Some people have many friends and most people have few friends. And this, I think, is an important realization. And I think it's something which came out of the data. We're still trying to get a lot of things written up. There's still a lot of antagonism. I've never in my life since the 60s had as much difficulty getting papers accepted. One thing that I did that, one very good thing that came out of this scientifically is that I started to work very closely to a real epidemiologist called John Ioannidis, who's a Greek extraction epidemiologist at Stanford. And, he is, so it's great. I mean, we've written 5 papers already, or 6 papers already in the last 6 months or a year, and they're getting published. And, he knows the field. And I know the computational biology of the area. So I think that, I wish it could have been different, but I think that there was a lack of willingness to discuss. I think we could have understood prior immunity much, much better. I think we could have understood T cells are very important as a complementary part of the immune system. I wrote to friends who were experts in T cell research, and they said there's no way T cells can have anything to do with this. T cells are important because T cells work with blood groups. And it's very likely that, say, Orientals who have different blood groups have different T cells. So you really can't have a distant susceptibility, which is genetic, based on a very simple issue.
I'd love to get into kind of the future of scientific debate and
Let's go ahead, yeah.
But just really, really quickly, just going back to what you got right. On the flip side, what did you get wrong? What would you do differently if you could replay it?
I would be much, much less political. I'm pretty unpolitical, but my doubling down on what was happening in the United States just was done to ignore people. Very early on in my first Israeli television interview, I said I would be surprised if more than 10 people died. That was insensitive and stupid and not the way you talk on television. But, there'd been asking annoying questions and showing how stupid they were for a while. So I needed to learn to be much, much more circumspect. On the other hand, you can see how openly I'm speaking now. I'm not very good at being circumspect. So,
But I'm interested to know whether or not part of that doubling down or part of that maybe playing the game in your own words, did that stem from a frustration of a lack of a debate? The fact
yes, oh, definitely. I was very angry. I was angry with Stanford colleagues. I was angry with other colleagues people in my own field. I mean, essentially a field that I invented, were behaving, and extremely stupidly. But it doesn't matter. I mean, Twitter is full of, nastiness is almost part of the game, which is fine. It gets people's blood going. It makes you want to get back, and it's good. I don't think it's, if I had to argue with ChatGPT all day, it would make me very uncreative.